When most people think about nuclear submarines, they picture silent giants lurking beneath the ocean, ready to unleash unimaginable power at a moment's notice. But what's less known is how these underwater behemoths play a pivotal role in global politics, sometimes in ways that never make the headlines. So, what's something people don't know about nuclear subs in politics? It's not just about firepower or deterrence. These vessels are also tools of psychological warfare, diplomatic leverage, and at times political theater. Their mere presence, or the announcement of their movement, can send shockwaves through international relations, signaling intent, resolve, or even a warning without a single shot being fired. Nuclear submarines aren't just weapons, they're one of America's loudest, most unmistakable signals to both allies and adversaries. When a U.S. president talks about moving them, it's not just a military maneuver, it's a message, broadcast loud and clear across the world's capitals. These subs are the ultimate insurance policy, a reminder that the U.S. can strike back from anywhere, at any time, even if its land-based forces are wiped out. That's why their movements are watched so closely and why their deployment is often shrouded in secrecy, until, of course, someone wants to make a point. Let's break down why former President Donald Trump just made headlines by moving these subs after a provocative taunt from Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's former president and current deputy chairman of its Security Council. This isn't just a story about military hardware, it's about the high-stakes chess game between two nuclear superpowers, where every move is calculated for maximum impact, both at home and abroad. Here's the short version. On August 1st, President Trump announced that he had ordered 2 U.S. nuclear submarines to deploy to appropriate regions. The announcement was made with his characteristic flair, ensuring that the world, and especially Russia, was paying attention. But what does appropriate regions really mean? In the world of nuclear strategy, ambiguity is often the point. It keeps adversaries guessing, forces them to consider worst-case scenarios, and ideally, deters them from making risky moves of their own. So why did Trump make this move? The immediate trigger was a public insult from Medvedev, who called Trump a delusional warmonger, and referenced Russia's infamous dead hand system, a doomsday device designed to automatically launch a nuclear counterstrike if Russia's leadership is wiped out. The dead hand, or perimeter, is the stuff of Cold War nightmares, a reminder that the nuclear balance of terror is still very much alive. Medvedev's comments weren't just personal, they were a not-so-subtle threat aimed at reminding the U.S. that Russia still has the power to end civilization if pushed too far. Trump, never one to back down from a challenge, especially one that plays out in the global media, fired back. He set a public deadline for Russia to end its war in Ukraine, warning that there would be consequences if Moscow didn't comply. This wasn't just a diplomatic note or a private phone call, it was a very public, very deliberate escalation, designed to put pressure on the Kremlin and rally support at home. Trump's response was classic brinkmanship: raise the stakes, force the other side to blink, and show the world that you're not afraid to play hardball. By making the movement of nuclear submarines public, he was sending a message not just to Russia, but to every country watching the standoff unfold. The message was clear: the U.S. is willing to go to the brink to defend its interests, and its allies. When Medvedev doubled down, refusing to back off his threats and continuing to taunt Trump in the media, Trump escalated further. He made his submarine deployment public, telling reporters that he had to be very careful because this was the ultimate threat. The implication was unmistakable. Nuclear war was on the table if Russia didn't change course. For some, this was a terrifying prospect. For others, it was a calculated move designed to force Russia to reconsider its actions in Ukraine. But what does this all really mean? Is the world actually closer to nuclear war? Or is this just another round of political theater, designed to score points and grab headlines? The answer, as always, is complicated. On one hand, the movement of nuclear submarines is a serious matter. These are the most powerful weapons in the U.S. arsenal, and their deployment is never taken lightly. On the other hand, military experts point out that U.S. subs are always on patrol, quietly circling the globe, ready to respond to any threat. The difference here is that Trump wanted everyone to know about it. This is what's known as strategic signaling. By making the deployment public, Trump was sending a message to Russia, to America's allies, and to the world at large. The message: the U.S. is watching, it's ready, and it won't be intimidated. This kind of signaling is a key part of nuclear strategy, designed to deter adversaries and reassure friends. It's a high-stakes game, where miscalculation can have catastrophic consequences. Military analysts agree that for all the drama, this is mostly about perception. The U.S. Navy's Ohio-class submarines are always out there, silently patrolling the world's oceans. Their locations are top secret, their missions classified. By announcing their movement, Trump was breaking with tradition, using the subs as a tool of public diplomacy, and, some would argue, as a way to boost his own political standing. But make no mistake, the threat these submarines represent is very real. Each Ohio-class submarine is a floating arsenal, capable of launching up to 24 Trident II-D5 nuclear missiles. Each missile can carry multiple independently targetable warheads, meaning a single sub can devastate dozens of cities across an entire continent. The destructive power at their command is almost unimaginable, enough to end life as we know it. That's why their movements are so closely guarded, and why their deployment is such a powerful signal in times of crisis. Russia's official response to Trump's announcement was, at least on the surface, muted. The Kremlin didn't issue any formal statements, and President Putin remained silent. But behind the scenes, there were signs of concern. Russian state media mocked Trump's post as a tantrum, dismissing it as political posturing. But at the same time, the Russian military launched a series of readiness drills, testing their own nuclear forces and making sure they were prepared for any eventuality. It was a classic case of public bravado masking private anxiety. The silence from the Kremlin was telling. In the world of nuclear diplomacy, sometimes saying nothing is the loudest message of all. By refusing to engage directly, Russia avoided escalating the war of words, but their actions spoke volumes. The readiness drills were a clear signal that Moscow was taking the threat seriously, even if they weren't willing to admit it publicly. For ordinary Russians, the message was clear. The standoff with the U.S. was deadly serious, and the risk of miscalculation was real. For world leaders, the episode was a sobering reminder of just how quickly things can spiral out of control. The line between signaling and escalation is razor thin, and the consequences of a misstep could be catastrophic. In private, diplomats scrambled to reassure their counterparts, urging restraint and caution. In public, they called for dialogue and de-escalation, hoping to prevent the standoff from turning into a full-blown crisis. The bottom line? This is high-stakes messaging, not a march to war. Both sides are playing a dangerous game, using the threat of nuclear force as a bargaining chip in a much larger struggle for power and influence. For Trump, the move was about showing strength, raising pressure on Russia, and, let's be honest, scoring political points at home. For Russia, it was about reminding the world that they, too, have the power to destroy. In the end, it's all about perception. The real battle is for the hearts and minds of the public, both in the U.S. and abroad. By making the submarine deployment public, Trump was trying to shape the narrative, to show that he was tough on Russia and willing to take bold action. His critics called it reckless, accusing him of playing with fire for political gain. His supporters saw it as a sign of strength, proof that he wouldn't back down in the face of threats. But one thing is certain. When world leaders start talking about nuclear weapons, everyone pays attention. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the margin for error couldn't be smaller. In a world where a single miscalculation could trigger catastrophe, the importance of clear communication and cool heads has never been greater. As the dust settles on this latest standoff, one question remains. Was Trump's move a stroke of strategic genius or a dangerous gamble that brought the world one step closer to the brink? Only time will tell.